All right, it's 5 o'clock. We'll call this work session to order. So the city council will be meeting in a work session for a presentation on what housing production strategy is and possible policy directives. So I will turn it over to Kelly.
Thank you. I'm going to do a quick 30-second introduction and then turn it over to our very smart consultants who are working on this. So housing production strategy, why are we here? The state, as well as the West Coast and the vast majority of the country, has an identified housing shortage. And so the state has responded in cities larger than 10,000 people or more population, having a requirement to create a housing needs assessment to identify the needed housing for our population growth, as well as a housing production strategy to identify ways in which the city shall implement to create the greater opportunities for housing as a whole. And so we are a city with a population greater than 10,000. And so this is a legal requirement that has been put upon us by the state to try to address the housing shortage as a whole. We did receive a grant from the Department of Land Conservation and Development to put together this strategy. And as part of that, we have partnered with Cascadia Partners. And with us is Jamin and Rachel, who will be walking us through this presentation. As you saw in the agenda packet, it is dense and long, and there is a lot to get through. This is the first of many points of contact we will be having as part of this process, and there will be several community outreach opportunities as well, including the survey that we currently have circulating. So the suggestion I would put before council today is this is really the opportunity to look through these list and menu of strategies and narrow it down to those in which you do not want to even consider pursuing whatsoever, and those that you would like us to consider further and suss out further. And so it's really more of a quick hit. We have an hour to get through this whole thing. And so we welcome questions as we go along, but our consultants will walk through everything. And really, we're trying to get the quick touches of how to move forward at this point. And then what our next steps will be, we'll talk about that later. So with that, I will turn it over to Jamin and Rachel.
Yeah, thanks for that introduction, Kelly. And thanks to all the counselors for having us here tonight. We're glad to be here and hope to give you some useful information to think about and get this conversation started about how the city should compile its housing production strategy. And we know this is a state requirement, it's a legal requirement, but hopefully it's also an opportunity for the city to just take a step back and think about all of its housing related policies and think of ways that positive changes that can be made to support more affordable housing and housing production in general. So I guess I should introduce myself. I'm Jamin Kimmel. I'm a partner with Cascadia Partners. I am the principal in charge for the project, and I will let Rachel introduce herself as well.
Good evening. My name is Rachel Cotton. I'm a senior associate at Cascadia Partners, and along with Jamin, we've worked on several housing, code, and policy related projects across the state and are pleased to be working with City of Lebanon on this housing production strategy project. And Jamin, are you able to share screen?
I believe so. Can everyone see that?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Okay. So here's our agenda for tonight. As Kelly mentioned, we have a lot of information we want to share with you, but we also want to get your input and be able to ask us some questions. And so we're going to try to get through the presentation as quickly as possible. We have decided to spend about 25 minutes on an introductory presentation and covering a couple of key types of housing strategies. So those are regulatory and financial incentives. Then we would take a minute to ask some questions and discussion on that because that can get pretty technical and detailed. And then we'll have about another 10 minutes to talk about some other strategies and another 10-minute break for questions and discussion. So I will kick it over to Rachel to give us the overview.
Thanks, Jamin. And we'll start with an overview. Kelly did a great job, as expected, sort of introducing this project. Why is the city doing this? It's a state requirement, as mentioned. The housing production strategy is updated on a sequence of about 6 to 8 years, along with the housing needs analysis that Kelly mentioned. And the purpose of the document is really to identify strategies and actions the city will take to facilitate development of needed housing that was identified in the housing needs analysis. So Lebanon did an HNA, is what we call the housing needs analysis, abbreviated, in 2019. And so we're following up on the needs identified in that report. And the city also, as part of the housing production strategy, the actions and strategies included must include a timeline for implementation, as well as a progress report to the state every 4 years. Next slide. And so tonight, just to sort of echo what Kelly and also Jamin said, we're really focusing on a high level conceptual version and also of the strategies and actions. And our presentation tonight is meant to be sort of an informational, conversational companion to the very detailed materials that you received in your packet. So we're just hoping to kind of talk through some of the concepts and get your feedback, like Kelly said, about things that are sort of go, no go, and then where really what we're interested in is any refinements that you would recommend to best fit some of these tools to the needs in Lebanon. And so really, as this slideshow or the schedule on the slideshow shows, this is our first conversation with the council. And so this is the first of a series of conversations. Next week, we'll be meeting with the Planning Commission, providing a similar presentation and getting their input as well. And there will be a community meeting in early November, as well as the survey will continue to be open for a few more days, just to get some initial input from the community on the direction that we're going with these strategies. And then over the winter, we'll be working with you again on more feedback, some additional community input, and then an adoption process in the spring. So really what we're hoping to get to by starting tonight and getting your input is a housing production strategy that details the actions and strategies that the city will implement on a certain timeline with your feedback about what works well, what you think will work well and would recommend in Lebanon. Next slide. And so just a little bit of review. These are the numbers that came out of the housing needs analysis that was done in 2019. So that analysis identified a 20-year need for roughly 2,500 housing units. Roughly 1,300 of those are owner occupied, and the remaining 1,200 or so are renter occupied. You can see them here broken down between renter and owner needs at different income levels within the region that Lebanon is in. And just Kelly has the kind of contextualized housing need report that a lot of this information is based on. We don't have enough time to go through it tonight, but I would recommend either requesting that, or we can have her send that out, so you're getting sort of the background about where all these strategies are coming from based on the identified housing need and different income levels. Next slide. And one thing that we really want to commend the city for is for everyone there, I'm sure you're well aware of this. There's a lot of housing that's actively being built in Lebanon, and particularly since the time that the housing needs analysis was done. So we just want to emphasize that we've taken sort of that baseline need, and then we have identified the housing that has been built since 2019 and removed it from the remaining need. So there's a lot of numbers on this slide, but the main takeaway are the cross-hatched areas are housing that has been built at the various income levels, and then the solid bars indicate remaining need over 20 years. And that's kind of important to keep in mind as we look to tools that will help fill some of the gaps that are recognized in the market currently. Next slide. And now I will turn it over to Jamin to talk through some of the regulatory and financial tools that are being considered.
Okay, so we're first going to focus on regulatory strategies. So this is a broad group of different kinds of changes, but what they hold in common is that we're focused on the way that the city regulates housing through the Land Development Code, and so the Lebanon Development Code. And we've done some pretty detailed analysis of the code and have some insights to share on where we think some tweaks could be made to try to better address the housing needs in the community. First off, in just general, one of our findings in looking through the code is that it is relatively supportive of the city's housing needs. There are a variety of different residential zones. Those zones allow for a variety of housing types, which is very important. And in some cases allow for higher density housing types, including kind of smaller minimum lot sizes for some housing types, multifamily housing at relatively high density. There is a density bonus provision for projects that include affordable units. So there's a lot of good stuff in the zoning code today. We want to recognize that. But our charge here is to think about what else could the city do to try to kind of calibrate the code, make adjustments to make sure that the kind of housing that the community needs is more likely to be built. So first, kind of how do we focus our efforts? There are a lot of different areas in the city. There's a lot of different residential and commercial zones. And so we took a look at the housing needs analysis and really tried to focus on the zone districts where there is the most buildable land remaining for housing. And so what that's shown here in this chart is that the RM and the MU zone, I think RM stands for residential mixed density, and the MU zone stands for mixed use. So it allows for residential as well as commercial uses. And those have the most remaining buildable land left in the city, so about 800 acres between the two of them. And they also have very similar regulations pertaining to residential uses. And so as we go through this presentation, we keep in mind that most of the changes that we're recommending would apply in those two zones, really where the majority of the housing in the future is going to be built in the city. We don't recommend really that we don't find it necessary to have any changes to the residential low density zone that's shown in yellow here. So how do we know what kinds of code changes will result in either more affordable housing or more housing production? And so one thing that we try to do we're a land use planning firm, but we also try to think like the people who build housing for the most part are private real estate developers. And so we use a few different tools, including real estate pro formas and some site planning kind of tools to help us try to identify what kinds of changes would actually make a difference and to kind of quantify the expected impacts of a change to the development code. And you'll see some different numbers quoted throughout the presentation about the minimum feasible sale price or rent for a project. And so those numbers are based on some of these assumptions that we've shown in here. We provided in your packet. So just a qualifier that we're doing some modeling based on the best available information we have. They're always an estimate, and what happens on the ground can always vary depending on different kinds of real estate projects that happen. But these are based on the market conditions in Lebanon, and we also are basing it on some input we received from developers through some kind of focus groups and interviews with them. So kind of an overview of the regulatory strategies. So we've identified 6 strategies related to the development code. And you can break those down into 3 categories. There's 2 of them that are aimed at increasing opportunities for ownership housing, and particularly for ownership housing that's more affordable for that kind of middle or middle income bracket. So under 120% of the area median income. And then 3 strategies aimed at rental housing affordable to those households that are considered low income, which would be under 80% of the area median income. And those 2 income brackets that we're talking about are based on when we looked at the types of housing that have been built in the last few years, what the pricing is of those relative to the income levels in the community, those are where we see that there's the housing is not being built today to try to meet those needs. And so that's why these are kind of really targeted to those particular kind of income brackets and households. And then there's a strategy that kind of applies to all housing types, and we'll talk about that. So our first strategy here is to use the development code to try to encourage particularly smaller single-family detached homes. And so one thing is we looked at the data for the kind of housing that's been built in Lebanon in recent years. Typical new single-family houses are usually 1,800 to 2,500 square feet, which is a good size for a family, 3 or 4 bedroom house. But it's very difficult to make that size of house affordable to your kind of median income household. And so there are several kind of factors that lead builders to prefer building larger homes. Some usually they are more profitable, but one of them is the minimum lot sizes that apply to residential development. And so, for example, in the RM and MU zone, for a single family detached house, the minimum lot size is 5,000 square feet. So we recommend considering a reduction in the minimum lot size for single family detached houses to something in the range more of 2,500 to 3,500 square feet. This is actually what applies to townhouses now. So good kind of thing to keep in context is that these size of lots are already allowed for houses that are attached. So the idea here would be provide flexibility for that kind of smaller lot housing, but to be detached, which a lot of people prefer and a lot of builders prefer to build. Really the idea here is that you can encourage developers to build smaller houses on these smaller lots, and those smaller units are usually can be more attainable for those kind of median income families. So here's one of those models we talked about, just kind of showing potential benefits of that. So this takes a 5-acre site and looks at, on your left, a subdivision under the existing code of 5,000 square foot lots. You get 34 units on that site, and we estimate kind of minimum sale price that those units would need to sell for this project to work would be about $490,000. If you reduce the minimum lot size and do a similar kind of subdivision, just with more units on smaller lots, so 2,500 square foot lots, this makes it more economically viable to provide those smaller units. So you can see how the unit size drops from what we anticipate to be something like 2,000 or 2,200 square feet to more in the realm of 1,500 square feet. And the price per unit that's needed to make that project pencil drops to $345,000. And so there's a really significant benefit that can happen from doing more units on the same site. You're spreading the cost of development over more units. You're making it feasible to deliver a product at a lower price point. Now, one of the concerns that comes up with thinking about smaller lots like this is how it might affect kind of the need for open space and access to recreation. So there's going to be smaller lots, are probably going to be smaller yards. And so would that generate some demand from the community for more parks, more open space? And we think that that could be true, but there is ways to address that through the development code. One way is to address that could be to require a common open space. So you can see in the example on the right of the smaller lots, while the private open space on the site and yards on the lots have decreased, it's kind of helped to be offset by having some common open space. So this is similar to what would be required with apartments today. Common open space is required for multifamily development. Under this scenario in a subdivision, this would probably need to be something that's owned by like a homeowners association. So there's some downsides to that. At the same time, there's some upsides to being able to build those smaller units and deliver them at that lower price point. Okay, the second strategy, along with it's kind of in a similar vein as the reduction in minimum lot sizes, is to try to encourage particularly the particular form of housing, which is called cottage cluster housing. And so the city currently has regulations on the books to allow cottage clusters, which is just a term to describe kind of multiple small detached houses on one site. Usually they're kind of oriented around a courtyard or an open space. So the code today only allows for 4 cottages per site. But most of these projects where they've been built across the country and in the region have more like 10 to 15 units on one site. That's usually the kind of threshold where this kind of project really makes sense. And so the proposal here would be to increase the number of cottages that are allowed on one cottage cluster site, and also to limit the size of cottages. So the idea being you're allowing a little higher density, but you're requiring those units to be smaller so that you can try to encourage development to provide those units that are more affordable to your median income family. Here's a similar kind of modeling to kind of look at what the benefits of that could be. This is on a relatively small lot. So this is kind of an infill lot situation, 20,000 square feet. Today, 4 units would be allowed on that. There'd be no reason why a developer probably wouldn't build those units at a typical single family home size of something like 2,000 square feet. And to make that pencil, the project would need to sell those units at about 447,000. The alternative here would be to allow up to 6 units on the site. When you allow 6 units on this smaller site, those units really have to get smaller to kind of fit and meet all the setbacks and maximum lot coverage and other standards that apply. But you can still fit an 1,100 square foot unit, which is kind of the typical range of where these cottages tend to fall in. And the minimum sale price to make that project pencil is about 270,000, and that would be affordable to household at about that 120% of median income. So it's really hitting that goal of where ownership housing for that middle income is not being met. Now, these are smaller units, 1,100 square feet. It's not going to work for larger families or plenty of households, but there are some smaller houses out there would probably be interested in these kind of smaller cottage housing. Okay, then moving to the rental housing kind of equation. And so we took a look at the city's a variety of different standards that apply to multifamily development today. And our overall finding is that the existing development standards tend to encourage kind of larger and more expensive units. And so the key standards that we recommend kind of taking a closer look at are minimum parking requirements, the maximum height, minimum open space, and maximum density. So all these kind of interact in a way, and we'll show how some tweaks to those could really help to deliver some benefits in terms of housing affordability and then just overall production of more units. So, a key kind of idea to keep in mind here is that the more efficient that a site layout can be, a site plan for a multifamily project, it translates into lower development costs per unit. And that hopefully translates into lower rents per unit. And so those key standards that I talked about, parking, open space, and height, those are all really, really important to take a close look at. And there are some trade-offs between those standards we wanted to highlight. So for example, if the city were to increase the maximum height to allow up to a 4-story apartment building, more of that site then can be used for open space or parking. So you can achieve a similar density with having more space open on the ground of the site. So maybe not having to change open space or parking requirements. If that maximum height remains at 3 stories, then that's when it's challenging to try to achieve a higher density without reducing minimum parking or open space requirements. So these things all kind of interact, and it's important to understand those interactions. So lastly, another concept here is to kind of focus on more of the quality of the open space rather than the quantity. So when we looked at the city's open space requirements, one of the things we saw was that 25% of the site for a multifamily project must be dedicated to open space. That's a relatively large portion of the site area, and relatively higher than we've seen to many other kind of similarly sized cities as Lebanon. So we think it's possible to acquire a little less open space than that, but have the similar outcomes for what you kind of care about in terms of livability and kind of access to some recreational amenities. And so we think it's possible to require less space, but to kind of achieve a similar outcome. So here's the modeling to show kind of, conceptually what that could look like. The one on the left shows the existing code, and this would be a typical project very similar to probably what you've seen going up in the ground today. 3-story buildings, parking is provided at a little over 2 spaces per unit. You get to a density of about 25 units per acre there, and that's roughly where the city's maximum densities would limit it to. And so to make that project pencil, we estimate about $1,800 per unit is required in the kind of average rent. So the alternative we're showing here is making some of those tweaks we talked about. So reducing the minimum parking requirement, increasing the maximum height to allow 4 stories, and reducing the minimum open space requirement. So it's not eliminating any parking on the site. It's still providing a ratio of about 1.3 spaces per every unit, but it's less parking and a little bit less open space. But the big benefit there you can see is in the density. So far fewer or far higher number of units, and that translates into a lower average rent per unit that's needed to make that project work. So those are kind of the standards for rental housing for market rate projects. So we're thinking in that context of just what's outright permitted in the code. One other thing a lot of cities do, and the city has on the books today, is incentives for private developers to provide for affordable units. So currently there's a density bonus in the code, provides about a 20% bonus for projects that include units affordable to households at 80% of the area median income, which is considered low income. What we found in modeling is that 2 problems. One is that the cost of complying with that affordability requirement, having those income restricted units, really outweighs the benefits. So it would not really pencil for a developer to use that incentive. Secondly, it's not really physically possible to achieve that additional density due to the other standards that control density, like parking, height, and open space. So we recommend the city look at kind of adopting a set of incentives. So it might include a density bonus, but also might include a parking reduction or a height increase. And so we think that should be paired with these changes to the kind of base standards in the code that apply to market rate projects, to have some incentives in place that would make it even more attractive to provide a certain percentage of the units to be income restricted affordable. Another strategy under multifamily housing is look at having more flexibility for multifamily housing in commercial zones. So today in the city's commercial zones, you can only build housing if it is on the upper stories of a mixed use building. So the whole ground floor would need to be commercial use. This can be very challenging. One reason is that commercial uses just sometimes aren't viable on certain sites, particularly the kinds of commercial uses that would go on the ground floor of a mixed use building. And so there are options for providing a little more flexibility in how housing could be built in commercial zones. For example, you could allow for it to be sometimes called horizontal mixed use. Maybe you have a storefront commercial building at the front of the site with the housing in the back. You could also require less of the ground floor to be commercial if it's in a vertical kind of mixed use building. So maybe only a portion of the ground floor. So we recommend the city look at some of those options to provide a little more flexibility, because there is some buildable land in the commercial zones and places where there would be demand for some multifamily housing. Lastly, under regulatory strategies, this final strategy has to do more with kind of the process and procedures rather than the standards themselves. So as we looked at, the city has a special set of rules for infill sites, which are any site under 1 acre, and it requires the applicant to basically demonstrate that their proposed development is consistent with a whole range of characteristics of adjacent sites. So this is a fairly complex criteria to try to meet for an applicant. Requires you to do an inventory of all the adjacent sites and document all the characteristics of them. It also has some elements of it that don't comply with some state rules about having clear and objective standards for housing. There are some standards in there that could be argued to be discretionary or subjective. And so there needs to be some option for a more clear and objective set of standards for infill sites. So we recommend that replacing the current rules with that, there could be a more subjective alternative process. We'd recommend that there is a track for a simpler and more objective set of rules. Okay, now moving on to financial incentives. So what we're talking about here really is different ways that the city can use their their power as a taxing district and also in charging system development charges, use those tools as a way to try to shape the type of housing that's built in the community, and also to enable projects that may otherwise not be feasible, but for receiving some kind of financial incentive. So 2 ways that most cities do this, and those are through property tax abatements and various kinds of adjustments to system development charges. Most of the times, these are targeted to specific housing types. So it doesn't apply to all housing or even all multifamily housing. Might only apply to projects that have a certain number of affordable units. Might only apply to vertical mixed use, which is a great kind of form for your commercial areas, your main street, or maybe even just accessory dwelling units, which are small dwelling units built by a property owner, usually a single family homeowner. So those are the kinds of projects that are typically targeted by incentives. So we've identified 3 strategies related to incentives. The first is
Jamin, I'm so sorry. Can we interrupt for just 1 second while a
got a
train
train.
goes by?
Yeah. I know you're right in the station there, right?
Yep.
Mhm.
Thanks, Kelly.
Is it done?
Not yet.
Okay.
One more horn blow.
Sounds like a real train, not the choo-choo.
That's lumber. Yeah. I think we're probably okay now.
I think if you just speak, well, no, you're good now.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. I'll shout over the train.
We're good.
So 3 different strategies for your consideration. First is a property tax abatement. And the concept here is to identify some housing types the city wants to incentivize and really encourage, and provide a property tax, 10-year property tax abatement for those projects that the applicant could demonstrate would otherwise not be feasible unless they had the incentive. So that's commonly how these types of projects or these programs are structured, is there's a requirement that the applicant show, I can't make this project work unless I get the property tax incentive. There's some details on how that's administered. The other 2 have to do with system development charges. And so there are 2 different kinds of changes here. First is to change how the city collects SDTCs. So to allow them to, the time at which the SDC has to be paid to be deferred from when the building permit is filed to when the project is granted its certificate of occupancy. So after the building is constructed. This seems like a minor shift in timing, but it can actually have a big impact in the developer's ability to finance the system development charges. Thirdly is to evaluate the feasibility of providing a full kind of reduction or exemption to SDCs for certain housing types the city finds most important that they'd like to see developed. And so this can be targeted to some of those housing types we mentioned. But the downside of it is you do lose out on the revenue that would otherwise go towards the SDC fund, which goes to pay for public infrastructure. So that has to be balanced with providing this incentive of a waiver of a fee, but how does that impact revenue for infrastructure? So recommend the city kind of further study that option. So to give you a sense of how these types of financial incentives can affect feasibility. So we did a few different models, different scenarios for how a property tax abatement in particular could make it feasible for a private developer to build a project with income restricted units. So this would be a kind of a mixed income project. And so the graph here kind of shows different scenarios with the existing code or the proposed code, and then layered onto that a property tax abatement. So if you look at kind of the light blue line there, a project using the current density bonus for affordable units would generate a return of about 6%. And that's well below what's considered a kind of target return for a multifamily developer. The second in the dark blue shows how that project would perform with a property tax abatement to it. So there's a benefit to it, but it still doesn't really reach that threshold of being feasible. And then the three bars in green show the benefit of combining some code changes, which will allow for higher density with a property tax abatement for those projects that provide income restricted units. And I think I'll draw your attention to the last bar on the right. I think that is shows the kind of promise of this is that having those proposed code changes with a property tax abatement would actually allow the city to generate from that project, rather than just 11 or 8 income restricted units, up to 28 income restricted units. And those income restricted units would be affordable at 60% of AMI rather than the current standard at 80% of AMI. So kind of combining these policies together, you're able to get more units that are affordable to a lower income. And this is from a private market developer. That's the key point here. Most of the cities, I think all of the cities, affordable housing today has been built by nonprofit affordable housing developers. So the idea here is really to try to harness the private market developers to try to build some of those lower income units that are needed in the city. Okay, I think I'm going to pause for some questions there. And so I think we've got about 10 minutes for some questions and discussion right now.
Counselor Elfers, you look like you're ready to chat.
Say again, I'm sorry.
Do you have some questions?
Oh, more than 10 minutes worth.
I thought so.
We need to reschedule this to have more time to go through this, I think.
I tend to agree with you, but let's get as many of the questions as we can on the table for the regulatory piece. Maybe if we start with there and then go into the financial, because I think, how Kelly framed it at the beginning, setting it up as, talking about the things we know we don't want to do. And that will give our consultants some direction to say, okay, council apparently does not want to entertain 4-story apartment buildings in Lebanon. Just throwing that out there as a suggestion possibly. So that's something then these consultants can take back and say, okay, that one's off the table. We're not going to spend any more time doing that. But I agree, we're going to have most likely a follow-up meeting.
The 4-story is not a thriller for me. I don't see that. We've gone through the 3-story that are for-profit place built, not a nonprofit. The 2,500 square foot lots. If you want to see that concept, go over to Albany, over to the south side of Walmart. They built that there some years ago, and you can't change your mind in that place. The traffic flow is horrid. There's almost no green space. I can't even imagine if there's an emergency vehicle response needed, how they can get in and out of there very safely, especially if there's any cars around. It's too tight. And if one place goes up, and Jeremy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't that create a different set of issues for the firefighters when they're that close together?
Yeah, that'd be referring more to like the lot setbacks, how close the houses are together.
Yeah, they're talking 0 lot lines, basically.
Yeah.
Actually,
If you're gonna do that, why not do apartments?
Go ahead, Jamin.
I just wanted to clarify that the minimum lot size reductions, you see projects that still have your standard 5-foot side setbacks, same setbacks as a 5,000 square foot lot, and same lot coverage that applies there. And so we recognize the importance of that, and those are types of standards we don't think are necessary to change.
Okay.
The
Other
one thing I
counselor-
agree with was the parking requirement reduction. When we did Applegate Landing, we had to go in front of the planning commission because we had the requirement of 2.25 and we got it reduced to 1.75. And so far, it's not been a bit of a problem. We don't have all of our lots full or anything else. So I think that number is kind of inflated, the 2.25.
I have a question for staff and for Cascadia. The consulting project itself, is it to provide us with options or are these recommendations? 'Cause we're talking about the smaller lots, the cottage cluster. taller rental units and decrease of open space. Are these potential things that we can think about? The reason I ask that, if there are recommendations, maybe there's things that are missing, and that's kind of what I want to know about.
So this is considered a toolbox
Okay.
that has been put together by Cascadia as things that can be established and utilized to produce housing. The conversation is how many of them is the city willing to implement? And if there's additional options or suggestions that you have that could be added to the mix. This is really just meant to be a menu of options that we are then to sort of identify which ones do we want to suss out further and refine further that would then be catered to Lebanon, specifically to our area.
So to clarify the question, is Cascadia recommending any of these?
I think if they're on the list of that's presented to you,
Mhm.
these are all tools that would be successful. And so ultimately, it's if they are adopted as part of the housing production strategy, we are required to implement them. And so that's where we want to have the review of which
And the
ones-
housing production strategy is a requirement from the state, as
Correct.
we are over 10,000.
On that, it's, Jamin mentioned that we have to provide the state a progress report every 4 years.
Yes.
Is that a progress report on actual progress, or is that just a progress report on what strategies we've come up with?
That's a good question.
That's a really good question. Maybe Jamin knows, but it's brand new, so I don't think anybody's put one together yet.
No one has, yeah. No, it's a progress report on the city's implementation of these strategies. And so, I think when you think of the state's role in this project, I wouldn't think of it as they are going to be coming down hard on you if you don't implement anything here. I think what they want to see is that cities are looking at everything that their housing needs analysis said, and they're taking some positive steps to try to address those housing needs. So we've provided some very specific ideas in some sense, some more conceptual ideas in other sense. If there's a specific idea you don't like, we could make it more conceptual. If there's an idea, just the concept you don't like in general, we can remove it and we can explore other options. We're starting from what we think would work best, but we want the input.
So what kind of input have you had from the nonprofit and profitable contractors, developers? Or have they even seen it?
Yeah, we did an interview before we kind of developed all these, a roundtable with some of both the nonprofit and the for-profit developers. And these, several of these kind of are directly related to feedback we heard from them. The parking requirements was one that came up several times. The minimum lot sizes was another one, providing more flexibility in that. I think of the infill. I don't think the infill standards came up specifically. There was a lot of one of the things that developers like to see is more projects to be processed through staff review rather than having to go to planning commission or city council. But as we looked at it, we didn't think that was necessary to make any changes to the way city does that kind of process now. So it's a mix. Sometimes developers, we try to respond to their needs, but part of the reason we do that kind of financial work is to do an independent analysis of what we think makes the most sense.
Question.
Sure, go ahead.
When I was watching the presentation, I was looking at the pictures and I was wondering, hey, is that Lebanon? What are the chances, and after KJ mentioned, if you want to see something similar to what we're looking at, what are the chances that we can actually get some real life pictures of what this entity looks like so we can have an idea what it would look like in our community here? Is that even a possibility?
We can work with the consultants to put together a list of projects that you can take a field trip to go see.
Okay.
Based on our open space?
Based on these suggestions of the different types of housing, like what does a cluster cottage house look like? What do the smaller lots, detached single family home look like? That kind of thing. so that you can get the feel of the neighborhood. Obviously, these are where other cities have implemented it. Lebanon still has the ability to cater it towards the goals of the community as a whole. So if open space is a need or a requirement, that's something that we can incorporate into it. It's just got to be the balancing act.
And I love that idea because that allows us to be proactive instead of reactive because we're doing it now versus, something.
If
a
we don't
bunch
do
of stuff got
something, the
built.
state's gonna mandate it.
Right. But being proactive instead of reactive is very interesting.
Sure. So then switching into that, are there strategies or items that were presented to us today that we would be willing to tell the consultants to go ahead and do a little deeper dive in and bring back to us, at least from the first two? Obviously, there's two other portions of this PowerPoint that we haven't gotten to yet. So,
I feel like it's too soon to say don't, like, I think we need more discussion.
okay.
Not tonight, but
Sure.
before we cut anything off the table, that's my personal feelings that we should have
Okay.
more discussion amongst us to see what we like, what we don't like.
Okay.
I
Well,
would
we-
also like to get some input from staff because what I'm seeing here is the law of unintended consequences.
Sure.
What happens if we delay the SDCs? What's that track record look like? I saw something in their paperwork that was talking about letting them pay SDCs over a 10-year period. Who carries the note?
We already do that. We do allow for financing of SDCs.
Okay,
And so that is a system that we have in place currently. We do require SDCs currently to be provided upon building permit issuance.
I like that.
There's positives and negatives to the development community and
Sure.
to the collection process.
I know James cried when he wrote you the check. But the other thing, if we lessen the green space around these housings, what kind of pressure is that going to put on city parks?
I
What's-
think that you are correct. There are intended and unintended consequences on all of these. And there will be potentially administrative burdens that do not currently exist. So deferring SDCs, for example, means we may have to come and get you to make you pay after you have sold the house and someone is living in it, right? Somebody else. So I think there are concepts here that are more onerous, less onerous. I think the consultants are getting ready to do a community survey, asking people in the community what they think about some of these concepts. I thought I kind of wanted to get council thoughts on that before they go out. I always have problems with a community survey where 98% of the people say let's have no SDCs at all, and the council says, we could never afford
Right.
infrastructure. We don't want to implement that. You're now counter to what the community has told you they wanted to do, which is why we kind of pulled this together. If there's anything here, coming back to your 4-story, if the council, for example, has no interest whatsoever in going to 4-story apartments, then we might ask the consultants to not ask the community if that would be a preferred alternative. On the flip side, if 98% of the people responding on the survey said we'd love to have 4- and 5-story apartments, the council may say maybe we need to listen to the community making that request. So there's some you don't have to make any decisions today. That's why it's in a work session. We can certainly schedule another work session and come in with more information. I think this is a planning commission next week for the development code discussion pieces that Jamin has talked about, to start having the planning commission weigh in as part of what might be land development code changes. But we still want to get the community input and be back with you, probably multiple conversations to say, where does the council want to go? Or what does the council want more information on in terms of how it might be implemented, what the cost is, what the benefit is, what the administrative role is. I think we recognize a demand for more parks if there is less backyard space and more parks that are walkable where I can send my kids to get out of my hair because I don't have a backyard for them to play in. But that may be a trade-off that the council and community say is worthwhile in order to get more affordable housing available, more housing that people can
I understand
purchase.
that. I just think that we don't know enough we don't even know what we don't know yet on a lot of this stuff. And I think that we need a lot more input. I will say the fourth story.
I just think we need
thought
more
the ni-
time, really.
Yeah,
to
I
walk
fought the
through
NIMBY
it,
on the
so.
3-story, so I don't even want to try it on the 4-story.
Yeah,
Four-story would require a whole new fire truck.
I was going to ask that.
That's-
I
that's a
thought the
concern
fire
I have
district
too.
bought
At
one.
a certain point, when are they going to require an elevator?
Didn't the fire district just purchase a 4-story ladder truck recently?
Do what?
Didn't they purchase a 4-story ladder truck recently?
I don't know.
No?
I know they
I
have a
heard-
ladder truck. I don't know how high it
Okay.
goes.
Okay.
It's
So-
taller than my house.
I know that if I'm going to assume that if we took a survey right now of this room, 98% would probably say no more than 3-story.
I
But
think just to
think
keep
they should
things
help.
moving along, we do have 10 minutes before we actually start our council meeting. Jamin, I want to apologize. I think we're going to have to ask you to come back to do the second half of the PowerPoint. Kelly?
That's.
Something you can coordinate for us? Thank you.
That's fine.
In the meantime, any parting words for the consultants or for Kelly for consideration on this in the meantime? Going once? Okay. Jamin, do you have
Okay.
anything else to say in a short closing? I'm sorry.
No problem.
I
This is,
looked at this, I thought it was pretty meaty and dense and it was. So,
well, this is a big topic. There's a lot to cover. There's a lot of different things the city can do. A lot of the next couple of sections of this, as you review the packet we send on, there's land-based strategies and investments and partnerships. Many of those things are things that either the city is doing today or don't require as many kind of trade-offs, administrative burden. So I think they're a little bit easier to try to grasp what they mean in terms of the complexity of it. So that's positive, at least. But yeah, this is a big topic, and we also realize we're not doing this in a vacuum. A single goal of housing production. A lot of other goals and things to be balanced. We're just trying to give you what we think would be successful, and hopefully we can work towards something that's really tailored to what Lebanon needs and what's practical to implement.
I agree. Okay, well, with that, thank you for your time, Cascadia Partners and Kelly. And we'll go ahead and close the work session at 5:52 and have 8 minutes before council begins.
Oh my God, that hurts.
Tax
Tried to
abatement
be nice.
brings up a whole lot of other.
I wrote that down too.
School district, when they're gonna get their money, they need it now. County.
I think so too. That's true.
But it's something that's gonna come down the pipe.
Yeah,
No doubt
it's
about
going
it.
to happen no matter what.
All right, there's things I looked at there and I was like, no, but I'm not gonna steer it.
Oh,
I'm just
right,
gonna kind
right,
of,
yeah. We just didn't have enough time to,
There's no,
I mean, for the amount of things they proposed, that's just,
yeah,
Yeah, that's a lot
we
of
had to,
stuff.
we have to have some serious discussion,
absolutely. So, it'll be good. Have them come back.
We never even got into the tax abatement.
Yeah.
Oh, geez, no. Hey.
Sure that low-income housing already has, like, really reduced property taxes.
Yeah, but if it's delayed, how does the school district still get their percentage? Or is it reduced based on colleges? Any horns yet?
Not yet. Passed up on, I had a 65-yard shot on a bull.
Scans all show that the valves to the climate.
Time to get quiet. If I were to win. Isn't that my, oh yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome to have all those people there.
I'd like to go ahead and call the meeting to order, 6:01. Please stand for the flag salute.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will the clerk please take the roll?
Council President Steinhebel,
Here.
Councilor Reese-Camp,
Present?
Councilor Dykstra,
Here.
Councilor Savage,
Here.
Councilor Nassar,
Here.
and Councilor Olfers.
Here.
House.
Thank you. Okay, moving to the consent calendar. Everybody see it for review? And if so, do I have a motion?
Move that we accept it.
Second?
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. First up is the annual risk management report by Hub International, or by our finance director.
So actually, good evening, councilors. We do have Hub International with us. I just wanted to give them a brief introduction. Hub International, for most of you that know, is our insurance agent of record. They've put together tonight for you a risk presentation to kind of cover the last fiscal year and also some of our insurance options for this current fiscal year, 2023. And Mike Godfrey, I believe, is with us tonight, and he'll be doing that presentation.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me fine?
We can. Hello, Mike.
Good afternoon, good evening now, I guess it is. Yes, well, I'm going to try and share my screen here and we'll see how that works. Let's see. Is that working for you?
Yep. Far.
Okay, and when I go to this page, this next page here, is the size okay? Or do we need to make it
No.
larger?
No.
That work?
That works.
Okay.
You could zoom in a little bit if you don't mind.
Oh, did I just
Not the
lose-
Zoom tab.
That kind of zoom.
So zoom it a little bit more.
Yes,
Okay. And this this is a
that's much better.
11 or 12 page document that we can provide electronically. We have, I was hoping you'd have a copy of it. So we're going to review where we've been and what's happening generally in the marketplace from an insurance risk standpoint. Overall, we're part of the CIS, Cities and Counties Insurance Program, which is a collective program. They announced about 3-4 months prior to renewal, which is 7/1, that we were looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 15% rate increases pretty much across the board. And that has basically happened. In addition to that, we have some increases that are just simply because of the way our economy is going. We'll start with the property insurance. You'll see that this year our insured value is 121 million versus 109. That's about a 10.6% increase. And as we know, it's just more expensive to build. So we have a higher exposure, and our premium came in at $115,000, of which that related to a 5.5% actual rate increase. The rest of the increase is due to the increase in exposure. So, property has been a tough market. We've only had one claim as a city in the last 5 years, which is a good thing. So hopefully we stay on that path and we can see some softening in property coming soon, but it's not going to happen until replacement costs lowers, which might be coming in the next 18 months, but it's not coming anytime soon. Mobile equipment and boiler machinery are all included in his property up here. Earthquake's pretty static. We buy a Lloyd's of London product, $5.5 million cap. And that came in a little higher than last year, but not much. That's at 10%. Very solid program in that case. The crime coverage was flat. The tort liability, this is where cities and counties are getting hit harder. We've been solid the last 2 years, but you'll notice, and we'll recap claims here in another slide, but between the liability, tort liability, auto liability, and the property insurance, that's really where all your premium is coming from, and it's where your exposure's at as well. So the tort liability, we have $5 million worth of coverage before we get into the excess policy. And same thing from coverage standpoint on the auto liability. We have $5 million worth of auto liability. The premiums based on exposure as well for both of these lines of coverage. So as we grow as a city, we have more exposure, more rating basis. And so, if we have a 10% rate increase, it's based on the higher exposure, as well as having just an additional 10%. Auto physical damage, this last year, we were in great shape. The last couple of years, we've been fabulous, actually. Pricing's been very solid as well. Cyber liability. Cyber liability is a big issue at this point in time. CIS had a situation where they could not any longer afford to offer the full limits that we want. So we've had to stack some limits to get to our $1 million worth of coverage. And this is pretty typical within the entire marketplace. At this point in time, we don't see a softening in that market. It's just been getting worse, frankly. Our overall costs went from $4,200 to $10,000 this year. So a pretty substantial jump when you talk about percentages. When you talk about dollars, it's not nearly as big, but in terms of percentages, it's big. And it is a real exposure. We've got a number of insurers that have had unfortunate problems in that area. Going down to the other lines, pretty ancillary and no additional premiums associated with the accident policy, tank liability. Actually, the premium of the tank liability is $500. Bonds. And then we get down to the total. At the end of the day, what we're looking at is about an $85,000, $88,000 overall increase, of which when you blend it, it's about 50% rate increases and 50% growth in the community in terms of just exposures. So that's where the overall premium's at. Now, take a look at the specific line items, and I'm gonna, is that okay to see?
Yeah, that's
All
fine.
right. Okay, so in this slide, this is going to show you the actual property losses we've had in red. So you'll see that over the course of the last 5 years, we've paid premiums on average of $70,000, just roughly. And we've had 1 year where we had $34,191 in claims. Okay. Tort liability, this is a tougher line. And of course, CIS looks at them collectively. But in this, for the tort liability, for the liability insurance, we've had $957,000 for the claims in the last 5 years. And of course, I'm not including 2022, which is our current policy we've been in for 3 months now. We've had $957,000 worth of claims, which is an average of $191,000 per year. The last year was great. and 2020 was great. Where are the claims coming from? Pretty typical. The purple represents police. The 118 here is finance. And then you have public works over here. And then admin. So this is, once again, very typical of a pie chart and distribution in terms of liability claims that we'd see. Auto liability. Auto liability, you know, this is another large item in terms of potential liability. More rigs we put on the road, the more liability there is. 2019 was our tough year, and one tough year can cause problems for quite a while because of the loss ratios associated with it. But once again, 2021, 2020 have been exceptional. 17 was great. 18 was a little rougher, but 19 is kind of driving our loss ratio at this point in time. So far, so good on the current policy. Auto liability by department, same thing. Actually, not the same thing. I apologize. Auto liability, this represents transit. The 101, the blue represents police, and the $3,531 represents public works. Auto physical damage. So this is our vehicles get damaged. We've had 2 of the last 5 years be completely clean, which is outstanding. And 2020 was really quite good. That was only $2,700. But as a general line, this has been a solid line for us. No year where our losses outweighed the premium. And from a loss ratio standpoint, that's a good thing, gives us negotiating power to drive rates down. So there's auto physical damage. Now, this is kind of an unfair look at it just because you really haven't had a lot of auto physical damage claims, but as a percentage, this gives you the accurate picture of the police, public works, and transit. So this is kind of the cap. By year, our claim count here, we've had a total of 55 claims in the last 5 years, totaling $1,150,000. Okay. I made a note of during that same period of time. Let's see here. I'll drive the slide down just a little bit. So here's your $1,150,000. For that period of time, these are just the liability claims. During that period of time, from a premium standpoint, you paid $1,272,000. So we're basically running at a 90.5% loss ratio. Premium paid during that time was 1.272. Next, the work comp piece. So in Oregon, we're very fortunate. Workers' comp is a line of coverage that generally businesses have seen over the years, last 5 years, particularly going down. From a rate standpoint, it definitely has been going down. In our situation, you'll see when we look at our premium columns here, it's been very static. But if I look at the payrolls right here, you'll see that payrolls were going up. And yet the premiums were pretty doggone solid. 2018, we had just over 6 million of payroll versus 2020. Where's 20? We had 7.1 and they're flat. So, I mean, rates have come down. Now, one thing that's tough when rates come down is that your experience mod can be affected negatively because having the same amount of claims with lower premium, we'll use that number as the denominator, which drives your experience mod up. So, and we've seen that this year. Here's your expected versus your actual claims count. The expected is in red. And so you'll see in 2017, we had less than half expected. 2018, we were probably one claim less than expected, yes. But then we get to 2020 and 21, we have been over the expected amount of claims. And what the expected amount of claims is taking your entire peer group payroll and the amount of claims each of your peers have had and averaging it so that they get a collective number that can give you a comparison so you can see how you're doing relative to your peer group. It's a nice mark or a marker to judge yourself against, and underwriting uses it heavily. And you see in 2020, we had a higher amount of claims, and then of course your claims, incurred claim costs, track with your amount of claims. So 2020 is the one where we actually had 3 good-sized claims. When I say good-sized claims, I'm going to say over $30,000. And then in 2021, we had 1 or 2 that were over that, or over the $20,000 mark in that particular case. So how that affects us is that this year, you'll see our experience mod. Our experience mod has generally been in the 0.75. We've been 0.74, 75, 82, 0.80. Been very good for your industry or for your peer group. That's been very good. Well, when we had that year of 20, let's see, the claims of 2020, right here. When these claims hit our experience mod this year, it affected our mod to a 1.18. So instead of having a 0.82, which is right here, I'm sorry, probably small, but 0.82, which is a 18% discount on the rates that we paid. Instead, we were flipped and we had an 18% debit on the rates we paid for this policy year, which you'll see in this report next year that our standard premium will go up because of that. Even though the rates have gone down, our experience mod, which is a deviation, a credit or debit, I'm sure you're aware, has gone up to a 1.18. Now, if you look at the trending and you see that the following year of 2021, from a claim standpoint, you see that we had $38,000 of incurred losses. When it becomes part of the equation next year, this year was $6,800 worth of losses is going to fall off. This is going to be part of what the experience mod calculation. And at this point in time, I anticipate your experience mod increasing a little bit next year, not bad, but to 1.21. That's very tentative, but trying to anticipate where it will be, and I'll be able to nail that down 6 months prior to renewal. We should never have a surprise when it comes to workers' comp in terms of experience mod and overall rate. So paid to standard loss ratio, this year right here is the one, that's affected us. But in general, you guys have been really good. Claims frequency has jumped a little bit as, we're talking COVID years and things have been a little bit unsettled. So it's very, a very common picture that I'm seeing. So far this year in this policy, we've had 1 claim and the expected is 2. So from a work comp standpoint, very stable market. We're very fortunate. If you looked at the rates from 5 years ago, you'd be just shocked at how much it's gone down. It's about 60% of what it was. So that's the last page of my slide. Is there anything I can do from a question standpoint?
Questions from council?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. Sir, thank you for your presentation. A few questions. Would you mind explaining tort for everyone here and so that we understand what tort and tort liability is, please?
Well, in this case, it speaks to tort liability, which is your public liability. But it also is a general liability, which is your premise liability. So it's the city's liability, trip and fall coverages, wrongful bodily injury issues, all the public related bodily injury and property damage claims that the city could get involved
Including lawsuits?
including lawsuits.
Okay, thank you.
You-
Second question is the bond area on page 1.
Yep.
Bond for city manager and finance director, it says that it's included in crime. Which area are we talking about? Excess crime?
No, it would be. Trying to make it. Where's?
I basically want to make sure we still have it in place, correct?
Yes, you do.
And if so, what is the limits?
I'm trying to look at this. See here, included in crime would be at the $500,000 limits. It is excess crime.
Okay.
Got that?
Yes, thank you.
You bet.
And lastly, the report regarding the, trying to find the page. The 5-year report on
Right here.
our performance.
Okay.
Next year, when you're making this presentation, will it be 6 years or will that be 5 years? Is there a reason that it's 5 years?
Generally, underwriting looks at a 5-year loss ratio. So that's why we have your full 5 years plus our renewed year to date.
So next year it'll start at 2018, not 2017.
Yes,
All right, thank you.
absolutely. Thank you.
Any other further questions for Mike or our finance director? Okay, well, thank you for the presentation tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Y'all have a nice evening.
Thank you, you as well.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay. Where's my agenda? Okay, next on the agenda, public comments. Citizens may address the council by filling out a testament comment card prior to speaking and hand it to the city recorder. I have a stack of them here. Each citizen is provided up to 5 minutes to provide comments to council. I don't know that I will use, you'll run this for me? Yes, thank you. So just please pay attention to this. Once it gets to the red, I will cut you off tonight because we do have a full house. So we'll go ahead and get started with Cassie Cruz, Lebanon Downtown Association update.
So many people here.
Oh, real quick, City Attorney, you had something you were explaining to me. Can you please let the audience know?
Sure. There may be members of the audience who are here regarding the annexation public hearing. I would just point out that the hearing itself is limited to the annexation and not issues that may arise after the annexation, for example, development plans, proposals, and stuff like that. If you are here and you wanted to testify as it relates to that public hearing, I would ask that if you're going to testify at the public hearing, that it be directly related to the annexation itself. In other words, not related to any potential development. However, since you're here, please feel free during the public comment section to make any comments you may have related to things that are not specifically related to the annexation, which is what the public hearing is about. In that way, you can avoid having me interrupt and say, we're interested in what you're having to say, but we really want to protect the record as it relates to the annexation itself. So if you're here, you want to talk about bigger concerns or issues related to what you believe to be what's going to happen after a potential annexation, I would ask that you speak during the this section during public comments.
Thank you. My apologies. Go ahead, Cassie.
Oh, wait, am I on now? Yes, I am. Excuse me, guys. So hello, once again. So I have a lot of great updates for the council and everyone else. And so the first one, I'll just get right to it. We had the Art and Wine Walk that happened last month on the 16th. That was really well attended with about 125 people. If you guys came downtown this last first Friday, we had downtown full of wizards and witches for the Harry Potter First Friday, which was presented by our Beauty's Bountiful Book and the Lebanon Mercantile. So I'll give more data and stats on that come my report next month. But to let you guys know, next month we're doing First Friday. We're doing like a giving thanks, where we just want to say thank you to our community by rewarding them with like good discounts and everything else, kind of like a sidewalk sale. So this is just us, because there was a lot of support during that pandemic, and a lot of support continuously within our downtown businesses, and they just want to give their gratitude. So. But what I have to share, what we're really excited about, Lebanon Downtown Association, as you all know, is part of the Oregon Main Street Network, which is a state-run agency through the Oregon Parks and Rec. Each year, due to the pandemic, we had not been back since 2019, but we have an Oregon Main Street Conference that gives a lot of great educational training to help us be better ran Main Streets, to our boards, committee members, Main Street managers, directors. So it's a really great opportunity to learn. They also recognize a lot of our main streets for what they're doing, whether it be for building revitalization. If you remember a few years back, Lebanon had won 4 awards for the transom window exposure that they had downtown. We had Dayla Johns was recognized as a community volunteer, and quite a few other awards. But this year, and I do apologize, we could not get it to stream in time, but I will just share with you the audio recording so you can understand what this award's for, because this is a first-time award. And I would like to just say this is a prestigious award that they're giving for us for a first time, and it was called the Open Door Award. And I will just go ahead and play this right now so you guys can hear what that is for. Well, as soon as I actually turn my sound up.
Creating an environment.
There you guys go.
The Open Door Award goes to a Main Street that has demonstrated a commitment to creating an environment that is welcoming and inviting to all programs, outreach, or other efforts. The 2022 Open Door Award winner is Lebanon's Family Pride Day. A Family Pride Day committee was formed and worked tirelessly to develop a vision for the event, and culminating in a celebration of the diversity of family. Held at the downtown park, the event created belonging for individuals and families of the LGBTQ+ community and allies, grew youth leadership and involvement, and featured local speakers who shared personal stories about what pride means to them, in addition to music provided by local band Reptile Love Child. The event continued with a 1-mile celebration walk, and the day ended with a feature documentary, Who's on Top? LGBTQ Summit Mount Hood, narrated by George Takei, that highlights the emotional stories of LGBTQs overcoming physical and figurative mountains. Family Pride Day created belonging by bringing nearly 300 people together and had more people waving and honking in support as they passed by. Social connection and belonging are a great need for all individuals. Living in a rural area, many are disconnected from services and resources. Family Pride Day brought LGBTQ+ resources and education in one area. Family Pride Day grew LGBTQ+ visibility and awareness, showing acceptance to the next generation coming out to their families.
So that was played, and Lebanon won obviously the award for that, and it was a first time award ever they've given. So I have to say a huge thank you to our committees. If it was not for the people who rallied behind this, this is the award right here, so if people can see. The award will also be displayed at Mugs Coffee House, so people in the community, kind of a local normal spot, people to go in and out and see. So I do have to just say huge gratitude to people like Tammy Cockrum, I know is in the audience, Zane Chapman, my son, who's in the audience, and then also Brittany Nassar, I believe, is in the audience. The two Jonathans were on the committee. Sally can't be here, but just a huge thank you. And it just, you know, what we do, and we know this in Lebanon because we've seen it with the medical school, what we do leaves an impression statewide, and it is seen. So just thank you, you guys, for the city for allowing us the space to create that. And I'll have so much more to tell you too, that's coming up for our downtown. We were also part of an upper story project that I said with U of O, and I'll be done, but watch KGW.
Thank you. Thank you, Cassie. And thank you for respecting the 5-minute time.
Mm. Do you want to ask for questions? Or are we good? We never have questions for me.
Any questions from council?
Perfect.
Okay, thank you. Congratulations. Okay, next, Brittany Nassar.
Good afternoon, everybody. So I bring some resources and I come with a heavy but very full heart for that award that we won, but I want to share with you also some of the tribulations that we went through, and that we can move forward from some of the disagreements and things that we had over that time. But I wanted to let you know that bringing Pride Day and bringing the Pride Proclamation here was a joy and difficult in ways that we didn't understand it was going to be. But we look forward to doing that again with you guys. They were very much worth it because we saw a 300 to 350 people group of mostly younger kids from the community find resources that they may not have had before. And after something like the pandemic, when everybody was separated, they found friends. I got to see people create community, and that community continues today. And that's really, really cool. So the continuation of creating safe spaces, even if it's just one at a time in a medical sense and in a sense in the community, is a beautiful thing that we love to inspire. And there's many reasons why we would want to continue inspiring that, whether that's for mental health, because this is not just about the LGBTQ community necessarily. There's prejudice that occurs amongst many different kinds of people, and keeping these conversations topical will help continue to bring everybody together. You know, I personally had seen some interesting things happen to me, and I don't necessarily want to talk about it, but I had Homeland Security called on me. I had threats that were called into my business on a daily basis on my personal Facebook, and I hope that on nobody, but I'm glad it was me that took on that struggle, because I can still accept that some people may not understand and may not be educated enough to understand where other people might be coming from or how they might be uncomfortable in their own bodies. And so I forgive anybody that felt that way. I forgive anybody that is still angry. And I hope that you can go out of your way to try to find someone in the community that you can help. You know, I forgive anybody that threatened me in that way. I don't want to hold that, but I can tell that some people have not experienced prejudice in the real world, and it shows. And I hope for nobody else in the community that occurs. And I appreciate that I'm the one that's in public doing this, because there's a lot of people that would have been really, really uncomfortable experiencing what I experienced. Anyway, humans make mistakes, they misjudge, they misrepresent, and they function on assumptions. And this is a continuing job and journey as volunteers in the community to continue to create the resources for the loving community. And I think down the pipeline that would look like education and maybe a resource center, or little things that we can build into businesses, whether that's paperwork about what the health disparities and the mental health disparities between LGBT communities or people that are of different races experience within the world, so that we can create more equity within the world, right? This paper in particular, I think I have about 15 copies. Anybody's welcome to take one if they want. What you'll find on paperwork like this, which this is accredited and from an ACON website, which is focuses on bringing resources about pride in health and well-being. It gives us facts like more than 60% of the LGBTQ people feel that if they see symbols of inclusion within their businesses, that they feel more safe within the setting and trusted within the community. And things like that are important because when people don't reach out when they are in crisis, you experience danger at a higher rate. Like the transgender community experiences attempts at suicide 11 times higher than the average community space does. And I think that's a horrendous number, but as somebody that works in the community, I can tell that there's a very high LGBTQ percentage community here. And we can only do what we can for our families, our kids, our friends, people's kids. This is a small community, so it's always somebody's kid. It's your neighbor's kid, probably. So the more that we can do, the better it's going to be. And we thank you for your support and albeit limited conversation, but a beautiful conversation about this experience. And it has shown many of us that we can in fact do this and do more and go farther to create better equity for everybody in the community, regardless of what the prejudice is, whether it's a disability, mental health disability, race, any number of things. So anyway, look forward to creating many more events, whether that's through LDA or in conjunction with LDA, to bring the community farther together. Yeah. Thanks for your help with that, guys.
Hey,
Appreciate it.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Right on time. Okay, next we have Anna Creel. And on deck, I'll make sure I do this from now on deck is Marcellus, and after that we have Teresa.
Good evening. I was here a month ago talking about the skate park. And I just wanted to come
Turn your
in.
microphone on.
Oh,
It's counterintuitive. The red
it
means
on
it's
now?
on.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Closer. Thank you.
you're welcome. I am Anna Creel, or Anna, and last month I came in to talk about the skate park and the concerns that some of the neighbors and I had about things that were happening. Since that time, I've been able to meet with Dayla Johnson, and we have been able to do some, or the Public Works came in and did some things at the skate park to help clean it up, took out the picnic tables, took out the dirt hill that the cars were parking on inside the park, and cleaned up the trees so that we can, so it's an easier vision through there, and it's not as dark during the night, during the day. And so, and I, some of the students that were, the young people that were causing the problems were not allowed to come back to the park for a while for and stuff. So I want to give kudos to our police staff, Chief Stevenson for helping and directing me to go to Dayla, and for Dayla for stepping up and meeting with us to get some solutions to what's going on, and to the Public Works that came in and worked diligently to get some stuff done so that we can have our families come back to the skate park and enjoy time with their families, and that is a safe place for everybody. I would like to, once again, though, I know that there's other things in the works. There's things that I was told that we want to get some signage up for about parking and designated parking areas, and then a hard fence to keep people from pulling into the park where the cement is. My concern that if we don't quickly get that done, that there's no hard safety barrier. So if there is a car that's parked facing the cement of the park, if there is a mechanical malfunction with the vehicle and they can't stop, they would go right into the park, and then someone might be hit. And so I just want to encourage that we can continue to work together and get some more things put in place for safety in our area. And maybe I understand that the original skate park committee is no longer there. And I would like to see that maybe a new skate park committee be established with some of the neighbors in the area and some of the families that use the skate park to kind of continue to create maybe a park, or we talked about making a neighborhood park watch, so that we can just kind of help and let people know that, you know, the neighbors are concerned, and that we want to make sure that this is a safe place for everybody in our neighborhood, and that so the neighbors feel comfortable living there too. We all need to get along, and like I said before when I came last month, that I don't want to see the skate park closed down at all. That is not my intention. I just want to make it sure that it's a safe place for all of our community members and our families. So Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for coming back and providing us with an update. I appreciate it, and I'm glad to hear that some of the solutions that have been put in place are making things at least marginally better. So
Yes.
it's good to hear.
Yes.
Okay. Any questions for? Okay, go ahead.
Have you received any other threats or any negative communication from anyone out there?
We had an incident last week that I had called on a gentleman that had parked in a designated in a parking area where the tables used to be. And I was concerned, so I did go out and I asked and just tried to make notes to just let him know, hey, sir, the parking place is over here. And it got kind of heated. So I just walked in the house. I said, thank you very much. But when he started calling names, then I decided to call the police to say, this is what's going on. I just want to make a comment and put it on record that what there is. But that was the first time in weeks that we'd seen anything like that. So
I just want to compliment you and the other neighbors that are taking it upon themselves to make the community better. And we really do appreciate that. Thank you so much.
you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Okay, Marcellus Angelford is up next. Oh, on deck is Teresa Newman, sorry.
So last council session, I was here, spoke about the storm drain thing. Just want to say that I'm in favor of it. Talked to Ron Whitlatch quite a bit about it. The only thing that I want to add to it, like I mentioned before, is a proviso for the new billing system to include billing that accounts for number of dwelling units or family units within residential properties. The other thing that I want to talk about is last council meeting, Nancy Brewer brought up an issue with the Trees and Trails Advisory Committee. She explained the plan to expand the role of this committee to include parks and specifically the ongoing development of Cheetah Lake. She also explained that due to the increased level of responsibility, this committee would need to have the rules for membership reevaluated. The committee needs to have restricted membership to ensure that the tax money paid by the people of Lebanon is actually controlled by the citizens of Lebanon rather than people from outside the community. Until now, membership on this committee has been open to people who do not live in Lebanon. To address this issue, Nancy put forth preliminary ordinance language that would restrict membership to only people that live in the city of Lebanon. Nancy also offered up that perhaps in the interest of inclusion, city councilors might amend the language to allow members or membership to one or two people who, although they live outside the city limits, should be allowed to participate in the committee due to a vested interest that they have in the city. Examples were people who might live outside the city limits but are within the city's urban growth boundary, and people that either own property or businesses in Lebanon but live elsewhere. Gamel, you had advanced knowledge of this matter, and you came to the council prepared with an agenda. You came prepared with a pre-made statement, a pre-made amendment that you didn't take ownership of and read yourself. Instead, you had Nancy read this amendment for you. This was a theatric tactic. You advocated strongly in favor of allowing someone to be a member of the committee who works in Lebanon but does not live here or own a business or property here. The way you presented this matter, it appeared that you were advocating for a policy. You kept referring to the merits of an outside perspective. As the other counselors started questioning, however, it soon became apparent that you were not advocating for a policy. You were advocating for a specific person whose identity you did not reveal. A person that is already a member on the committee, but they don't live here. They don't own property or business here. They only work here. And we don't even know if they work here full time. This was disingenuous at best. Clearly, you had a hidden agenda. You were planning to sneak your amendment through without anyone noticing that you were doing a favor to someone. This is the kind of stuff the people of Lebanon are fed up and angry about. We're tired of sleazy politicians, bait and switch, hidden agendas, ulterior motives, favors done in secret, quid pro quo, things being done in the dark, and then finding out about it after it's too late. We want honesty. We want transparency. We want full disclosure. I have no problem with you advocating for someone you think is a valuable asset to the Trees and Trails Advisory Committee to remain on the committee. I have a big problem with the deceptive way that you've gone about it. Instead of trying to sneak this person by the people of Lebanon and your fellow council members, what you could have done was openly address the issue. Explain to us that there is this awesome person that you know that's a super great resource to the committee. Have this person attend the council meeting. Introduce them to everyone. Show them off. Have this person address everyone and make the case why they should be allowed to remain on the committee. Sell this person to us. Don't hide them in the dark. Unfortunately for this person, whoever they are, your sneaky tactics have now cast a shadow on them. This person might be awesome, but right now the only thing I know is that you trying to sneak this person through the system. I'm not okay with that. I expect better from a city councilor. I darn sure expect better from somebody who would be mayor of this city.
Oh, sorry. Your time is up, but if you want to close just really briefly, please close your comments.
Well, I'd like to know who this person is, and with being on the planning commission and learning about the rules and everything that apply to that, and I'd like to know how that should be applied to the newly revamped Trees and Trails Committee.
Thank you. Any counselor questions?
Well, yeah.
I want to really quick reiterate what it says in the public comments directions that I'm given in place of the mayor. The council may take an additional 2 minutes to respond.
I take offense to being called sneaky or anything otherwise. This was entirely out in the open. It started at another public meeting, which you were not there. And if you had been there, you'd have heard the entire thing out in the open. It was a discussion about residency and whether I was for it or against it. It really had very little to do with the individual, except the individual you're speaking of has been on that council for a long time. And you know what? You're absolutely right. It's a wonderful idea that you have, that if that is a discussion that we're going to have, whether or not an individual should remain on that council because of their past experience, I think that's a fantastic idea, that they should be here and introduce themselves and have you an opportunity to meet them, because by no means was there anything sneaky or devious or hidden. And I take offense to that, sir. I really do. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you both. Okay, next is Teresa Newman. And on deck is Derek Lanning.
I'm having a hard time hearing tonight. This mic seems to be distorted. So can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
I'll try and speak up. So I've been here 45 years, a resident of Lebanon, and the fact that tonight is my first time at a meeting here tells you volumes about the state of the country and why I'm here. I'm representing conservative Oregonians living in this area. And someone in this room tonight recently said to me, when I said, you know, vision's really important, what is your vision? And they said, well, vision is fine, but let's deal in reality. And after tonight, I've been here since 5 o'clock. Vision is everything. Without a party's presentation of and commitment to a vision, there is division. We're a divided country today, even here in Lebanon, because of two visions diametrically opposed to each other, which have come to a head. One is the original tried and true vision for America's communities based on pride of ownership, law and order, the true vision or public safety, upholding our Constitution, support of legal immigration, commitment to abundant, affordable energy, building strong families, expecting schools to provide a world-class parent-approved education for their children, promoting merit-based job opportunities, protecting innocent lives, holding the medical community to the Hippocratic Oath, and respecting the amendment rights of others, all regardless of color, creed, or political persuasion. The other party's vision, I'm sorry, is the exact opposite. I could go on about that. I will condense it a little bit, maybe go back to it. But as a result, mainstream Americans like myself are really pissed. We're sick of the social experimentations, and we refuse to stand by any longer and watch a vocal activist minority destroy our communities. It is therefore imperative that we, the people of Lebanon, are aware of not just how you, the city council, are going to put out the multiple fires that have been set in our midst: crime, homelessness, drug addiction, unsafe streets, woke curriculum in our schools, but what you will do to prevent these fires from being lit again in the future. I want to hear you say no to future gay pride proclamations and prides in this community, and yes to family-friendly public gatherings. No to slapping up more apartment complexes proven to increase crime, and yes to single-family housing that will attract responsible long-term residents. This is just common sense. No to any push of sanctuary city status, and yes to recognizing legal citizenship only. No to pro-gender confusion and CRT curriculum in our schools, and yes to protecting our children from them. No to drugs, and yes to being a drug-free zone. No to people who are homeless simply because of lifestyle choice, and yes to requiring 20 hours of volunteer civil service from them a week to earn social services. No to those who are homeless due to mental illness, and yes to demanding the state find an effective solution to this crisis. The vision of the American dream by people like myself and the opposite are just, it's night and day. You will own nothing and be happy is a new motto that it's coming out. And that goes against everything we believe. So my grandparents came from Iowa. I was born and raised in Iowa. They were poor, but they were proud. They never expected to receive anything they didn't earn. They were model citizens, typical of their time. I've been in Lebanon 45 years. I've planted my stake in the ground here. This is my home, and I'm not going to stand by and watch it ruined any longer. That's why I'm here after 45 years, because I'm seeing these apartment complexes going up. I'm seeing drugs in the streets. I'm seeing things happening in schools that shouldn't be happening. Whatever you do in private, do it in private. But your sexual preference doesn't need to be in the public, in the streets. It's crossed a line, a bridge too far, and enough is enough. And we've had it. I want you to know this, and I'm speaking, I guarantee you, I am speaking for the majority of Lebanon's citizens.
Ma'am, your time is up. If you have anything you'd like to say in closing?
Pardon?
Your time is up. If there's anything you'd like to say quickly in closing, please do now.
No, I think I said everything I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you. I just want to mention really quick off the bat that CRT curriculum in schools are not something that this city council works with. Those are for the school board. The school board meets here tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. I encourage you to attend and give that message to the schools. But we do not affect that here at in this body with this tax-paying audience. So thank you again for your comments. Next up, Derek. And do we have other comments after Derek? Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm here to address the city council and
Please
the
move-
local.
Can you please move the mic a little closer?
Okay, I'm here to address the city council and local police department to we got a homeless crime problem going on between 12th Street and 7th Street. And as neighbors, have kind of ganged up and trying to ask them, please don't break into our cars, please don't steal stuff off our porches, park a bunch of wrecked vehicles all over the place, which the police department's aware, as the neighbors in that area have been calling to deal with this. And it's usually about four different groups of homeless folks that seem to be doing this, and usually the same ones all the time. And I realize the police department has their hands tied. So I'm here to ask the city council, can you please kind of help the police department be able to deal with the actual crimes that are going on? Being homeless is not a crime, so don't please misunderstand me there. But what is the crime is when they steal stuff, they damage property, they do drugs in front of the kids out there. It's, as a father and as a resident, I have a little bit of an issue with that because I work hard for the things I've got and things get stolen. And it's not the end of the world, but it's really frustrating. For some of us, that's all the stuff we've got. And so I'm just kind of saying, hey, can you please address this issue? If you're willing to do that, I really would appreciate it.
I know that I'm looking at the agenda for our future meetings, and actually we have a work session scheduled on the 26th at noon. I understand that's the middle of the day. Trust me, I'm taking off from my own job to be here. But we will be streaming that, of course, online if you can't make it. But my understanding is we will have an update from the ad hoc committee that is looking to see what our options are in terms of addressing homelessness. As I'm sure you're aware, we're not the only municipality dealing with this,
Oh, I
large
know.
or small.
It's
So-
Oregon in general is having a bad problem with it. But it's just, our frustration is we live in an apartment complex. We're all kind of bundled up right there. And it's like, it's gone from just being, about from 2008, things were pretty mellow. And now it's in the last 2 years specifically, it's gotten to be where we're having to bug the police department on a constant basis and their hands are just tied, literally. I think it's financial, officer related. They don't have enough resources. And I know in order to help them to deal with the problems and to help the community, we need to go before the city council and say, hey, we're asking you as a community. I know that the money's tight, but we may need to shift a little bit of resources to help the officers help the community.
Can I ask for just, you said between 7th and 12th, what's the cross street?
Well, okay, so here's what's going on. Between 7th Street, right behind the high school, all the way up to 12th Street, 9th Street and 12th Street and 7th Street, there's a huge crime issue going right on through there. And it goes on clear down past the little church there too. So it's not just technically that, the 7th Street cutoff, but and it usually happens about, between 3 in the morning and about 6 in the morning, just before the kids come out to the bus stops. And then it happens usually, between 11 and 1 o'clock at night is when they start coming out. And so we've been, as residents there, because our managers have said, hey, as residents, you have the authority to please ask them to leave, because legally by law, they can't just simply ban someone there. And so as residents, we've been kind of keeping an eye on watching things, and they will literally go up and walk up to the cars you own and they'll try to open them up and unlock them. And we could be on the phone with the police department saying, hey, we got someone doing suspicious activity and they've got an officer out doing some other stuff, which they have to do. And they don't have the resources to come deal with a situation of, hey, what's this person doing? Why are they doing it? Why, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm just saying, I'm not trying to pin anybody specifically for not dealing with it, but I'm saying that what I'm seeing is the officers literally, the resources are too limited.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's all I had to say.
All right, thank you for your comments tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any questions? Good. Okay, thanks again. Any other public comments before we close public comments and move into the public hearing annexation? There is also a second opportunity for public comments at the end of the meeting. So with that, I will go ahead and move us into the public hearing annexation. So the public hearing for annexation A22-06 is open at 7 p.m. on the dot. Our city attorney will again go through the required, we'll go through the required hearing procedures.
Tonight's hearing will be held pursuant to Oregon's quasi-judicial hearings laws. Tonight's hearing will be pursuant to the quasi-judicial procedures set out. I think so.
Sorry.
Get a little closer. We'll be going pursuant to the quasi-judicial procedures set out under ORS 197.763. At the start of each hearing, council members will be asked to disclose any ex parte contact, conflicts of interest, or bias. If you have any questions as to what those are, if they apply to you, please feel free to ask and I'll be happy to answer. The hearing will start with the staff report, which will include information that staff believes is relevant to the issues at hand and how they apply to the city's comprehensive plan and land use regulations. After the staff report, council members are allowed to ask questions of staff. Following this, the hearing will then be open up for public testimony. The applicant and the proponents of the application will go first as they have the burden of proof. Any opponents of the application will have a chance to be heard, and finally, there will be a chance for rebuttal if necessary. Testimony may be in oral or written form, but must be directed towards the criteria outlined in the staff report, the comprehensive plan, or the city's land use regulations. Any issues raised must be accompanied by statements and evidence sufficient to allow the council and party members an opportunity to respond. Please note that failure to raise an issue, including constitutional issues, by the close of the hearing will prevent an appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals. Following the close of the public hearing, all remaining discussion will be held among the council. Council may approve or deny the application or approve an application with conditions of approval so long as they are supported by the facts of the case and the land use regulations. And with that, Ms. Mayor, you may ask if there are any conflicts of interest.
Title correction, I am not the mayor. Do any counselors wish to declare ex parte contact, conflict, or bias? Seeing none, is there anyone in the audience that objects to the notice that was sent in this case or to the jurisdiction of the body to hear and consider this case? Will the Community Development Director please present the staff report?
Good evening, Madam President and members of the City Council. Before you tonight is a proposed annexation of 2 parcels on the southwest corner of Stoltz Hill Road and Airport Road. The 2 parcels combined are a total of 0.35 acres in size. And they currently consist of an existing convenience store on the eastern parcel and a single-family home on the western parcel. The proposal tonight is to simply annex the properties into the city, which is basically a jurisdictional change between they are currently governed by Lane County and their codes and their regulations, and by annexing into the city, they become governed by the City of Lebanon codes and standards and have the ability to utilize and connect into our city facilities and services. And so in order to be able to annex into the city, the property needs to be contiguous to existing city limits, which it is to the north of the property and on Airport Road. There is currently no proposed development as part of this annexation. As part of our annexation ordinance, our comprehensive plan, and the Oregon revised statutes laws, a proposed development is not required to be able to annex a property into the city. If there is a development in the future, that will be considered under a different review process. And so tonight it is limited to just the annexation. And they are able to annex based off of being contiguous to city property, as well as having the ability to develop and connect to city utilities that are available in the area. There was a planning commission hearing that was conducted on September 21st, and the planning commission reviewed the decision criteria, which is also provided as part of the city council packet, and identified that the annexation meets the criteria for annexation. And it was a unanimous vote to recommend that the city council approve the annexation of the properties into the city. And so with that, I will conclude my staff's report, and I am available to answer any questions.
Okay, does council have questions for staff? Okay, seeing none. At this time, I'll ask for the applicant's testimony. Is the applicant here this evening? Okay, thank you.
Good evening. Is this on?
It is. Please
My name
move
is-
closer to it, though.
Okay. Good evening, City Council. My name is Laura LaRock. I am the applicant's representative. I work with Udall Engineering and Land Surveying. The address is in the application package for that address. Kelly always does a great job giving an overview, so I do not have too much to add. Annexation applications are pretty straightforward. take a look at a site, make sure it's contiguous or touching the city boundaries like this property is, that does make it eligible. Next, the city's codes and regulations, make sure that it is consistent with the city's policies. In this case, the city is in the comprehensive plan as residential mixed density, and that is accepted by the applicant property owner as a destination that it would come into under the zoning development code. Another criteria that the city looks at in annexation is it timely and efficient? Definition and from kind of the considerations that you take in mind for those terms is, can it be served by public utilities, streets, and is it able to be developed or redeveloped to urban standards? In this case, it is developed already with uses that are permitted within the residential mixed density zone. There is water, sewer, storm, either along the frontage of the property or that can be brought to the site if it was to further develop or redevelop in the future. And it does have 2 street frontages with access to both. So with that, I'll conclude my presentation, but be happy to answer any questions that the council has.
Thank you. Does anyone have questions for the applicant?
Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of this annexation? Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition of this annexation? Okay. With that, the public hearing is hereby closed at 7:07 p.m. All further discussion will be limited to council and staff at this time. Council, is there any discussion on this application?
I would say that it meets all the criteria in the code for annexation.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, will the city attorney please read the title of the ordinance?
Ordinance Bill number 2022-11, ordinance number 2987, a bill for an ordinance annexing and zoning property following consent filed with the city council by landowners in said area pursuant to ORS 222.120, ORS 222.170, file A22-06, Sona Athwal.
Okay, call for a motion.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Okay, bear with me for this next piece. Next up, we have a public hearing vacating storm drainage utility easement on North Williams Street. So I am opening the public hearing, correct? Okay, thank you. The public hearing for vacating storm drainage utility easement on North Williams Street is now open at 7:08 p.m. Our city attorney will go through the required hearing procedures. Again, briefly.
We're going to follow the same procedures in order of presentation as the previous hearing. Again, public testimony may be provided in oral or written form and must be relevant to the hearing at hand. Failure to raise an issue, including constitutional issues, with statements or evidence sufficient to afford the council and party members an opportunity to respond will preclude an appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals. Once again, Madam President, you may ask if there are any conflicts of interest, ex parte, or bias.
As the gentleman said, do any counselors wish to declare ex parte contact, conflict, or bias? Is there anyone in the audience that objects to the notice that was sent in this case or to the jurisdiction of this body to hear and consider the case? Will the will the engineering director please read the staff report?
Thank you, City Council and Council President. It's pretty clear in the report what we're doing here. In the consent calendar tonight, you approved an easement for the new alignment of the storm drainage pipe that goes across 489 North Williams Street. In the summer of 2021, we found that this line had collapsed. In December of last year, we fixed that pipe. And as such, we are abandoning or vacating the existing easement for that storm pipe.
Ron, can you go ahead and move your mic closer?
Sure.
Folks behind you can't hear.
Oh, can the galley, can we keep it down? If you want to continue with conversations, please step outside briefly. We would appreciate it up here so everyone can hear. Please continue. Thank you.
Anyway, we fixed the storm pipe, put a new one in, and now we are vacating this easement. It's no longer needed. As part of the vacation process, we posted the property. ORS requires us to post it. We've worked with the property owner. He's in agreement with doing this, and the advertisements were run according to ORS. So with that, I would recommend that the council approve the ordinance for the vacation at 489 North William Street. And I can answer any questions.
Does council have questions for staff? Okay, at this time, I'll ask for the applicant's testimony if the applicant is here. We are the applicant.
I'm the
Yes,
applicant.
sorry. There's a script. Bear with me. Is there anyone who would, no, there's no annexation. Okay. So we're moving on to the public hearing is closed. With a public hearing.
Anybody in favor and anybody.
Okay.
against.
Is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of this change? Anybody who would like to speak in opposition? Okay, the public hearing is hereby closed at 7:11 PM. And at this time, all further discussion will be limited to the council and staff. Is there any discussion? Will the city attorney please read the title of the ordinance?
Ordinance Bill number 2022-16, ordinance number 2992, a bill for an ordinance vacating storm drainage utility easement on North William Street.
Call for a motion?
Move for approval.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. All right, we're into the regular session, which is great because now I don't have to hit a gavel anymore. All right, regular session. We're moving on to adopting and accepting the 2022 Storm Drainage Master Plan. Again, Ron Whitlatch, please present the staff report.
Thank you very much. So it's been a while. We started this process in October of 2019. Excuse me. City Council approved a contract with David Evans and Associates to start the process. When we initially started it, we thought, we can probably get this done in a year, and that was their time frame too. And then a couple of things changed that, COVID being one of them. The other being our existing storm system and our GIS system had very inaccurate data. We decided that it was worth the effort and the time to go through and have a surveying firm get good data and run a good model, which has helped our GIS system out immensely. So we have better data now too. So that was part of the time frame. And then in July of this year, we held a work session with City Council, went through the document. This is going to replace a 30-year-old document. It's much more simple, I would call it. That's the one thing that we requested from them. We don't want a very complex document. We want a usable document. And with that, unless there's additional questions, I'm not going to go through the master plan. We did that in depth. We did put it out for public comment period. And as Marcellus alluded to, he was the only one that commented. He and I email exchanged multiple times and also sat and met and discussed his proposal in terms of what the rate change would be. Right now, we're still working on getting that off the ground. We're kind of in a spot until our GIS folks and finance folks can mesh everything together. That's the next step in this process, but they've been fairly busy lately. So until that happens, we won't move a whole lot forward. We hope to have something here in the next 6 to 8 months, but again, it all depends on staff time and whatnot. So with that, I'm open to any questions you have, comments. And with it, I recommend that you adopt it by resolution.
Okay, any questions? I had one. So the waiting on the change for the fee to come back to us, we're waiting to make sure that GIS, I'm just wanting to confirm, GIS can confirm the amount of, what is it, impervious space or whatever on a property before we will make that decision. It'll come back to us is what I'm asking, right?
Yes, they can confirm that now. The biggest issue that we're having is how to mesh the GIS data with our Springbrook billing system. And that's where, without having to go through and do this by individual account. So that's the next step that they're working on. As soon as they have that, then we envision work session, a couple of public hearings on this. But until we can actually see what the change is going to do, whether it's impactful and how impactful and which ways, there's not much we can really discuss at this point because we really don't know yet. But as soon as that does come, our intent would be to have at least a couple of work sessions so the community can comment, and also to have a couple of public hearings so that the ordinance could be read if we change it, if we go to adopt it.
Great. Okay, I don't have further questions. Council? Okay. So with that, if there's no further questions, I'd entertain a motion, or do you read the resolution? Sorry. There is a resolution on this. Please stand by while our city attorney reads the resolution.
Resolution number 2022-17, a resolution considering adopting and accepting the 2022 Storm Drainage Master Plan.
Call for a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Moving on. Motion passes. Next up, Ron again, updating Appendix A, TSP, Transportation System Development Charge, sorry.
Correct. Thank you again. This is kind of an example of how fast and furious development has been over the last 2 years. In September of 2021, the City Council passed by resolution setting the amount of an update to Transportation System Plan. We had a Transportation System Committee that kind of went through the different projects that were included in the plan, which is what the basis of the rate is. With that, over the course of the next, I would say 3 to 4 months right after this was adopted, we had multiple potential developments in areas that were SDC eligible projects according to our transportation system plan. What we did was went back to our consultant, Deb Gallardi, asked her to look at these 4 projects that you see here that were not included in the original project list and define what the percentage of growth would be to those. Turns out they're 100% eligible for SDC. So that's a good thing. One thing that we are not proposing to do at this time, we are not proposing to increase the fees that was set. Typically, when you would look at this, you're changing projects, you would typically take something off so that you match the fee that you're collecting. So technically, in the technical sense, we're under collecting right now. But if you look at the project list as a whole, the reality of it being done within the next 10 to 20 years, which is what the basis for the charge is probably not going to all happen. So my recommendation would be that we not adjust the fee at this point, just leave it as is and review it here in the next 2 to 3 years. If we start getting a bunch of SDC projects that all of a sudden it's like, oh, wow, things are really taking off, then maybe we can look at that time. But just know that we're not fully funding this, and I would recommend that we don't until we have a chance to see how development proceeds in the future and where these projects go. So with that, I'm able to answer any questions, and I would recommend you pass the resolution to update the project list in the transportation system SDC.
Any questions for Ron?
I have one. What, your last comment there, you're not fully funding. Could you kind of explain that, what you mean by that?
Sure. So the original project list is the basis for the fee. So you've got an original project list, and I do have that in front of me, which included, the lighting in here is so bad, I can't see. Somewhere in the neighborhood of the growth cost of, I think, $26 million. So if you look at the way SDCs are charged, that's where that $26 million would come from, right? So what we've said is, hey, we're going to add probably $8 million worth of projects to this. But if you look at all the projects that are on the list and you look at history and how projects have been done, good chance that they're not going to. The other option would be to cut some of these projects off. But if you leave them all on, I think you have a little more flexibility in what you do as development occurs, because the crystal ball is sometimes kind of murky in terms of where they're going next. And as fast as things are coming at us, I don't see any reason to update that. Obviously, again, if we got into a situation where we're putting out a lot of SDC projects, we're going to come back to the council and say, hey, we probably need to look at an adjustment in the rates.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Part of my understanding too is it needs, if there's an opportunity to maybe couple SDC funds or our funds with state funds or any federal funds, it needs to be in a project list or in a plan somewhere so we can point to that and say, look, it's not, this is a priority. Am I correct on that thinking?
Yes, so as long as it's in a plan, we would put any project that we were going to couple with a grant, probably in either a CIP plan, transportation system plan. I don't know that the SDC would, it would, because all of the SDC projects are in the TSP. So in essence, it's the same thing. So,
Okay.
but yes, you are correct.
Thank you. Okay, with that, if there's no other questions, I will have the city attorney read the ordinance number. or the ordinance-
Resolution
the
number
resolution.
2022-25, a resolution updating Appendix A, Transportation SDC Project List and Fee Schedule of Resolution number 2021-19, Exhibit A.
Thank you. Call for a motion.
Move for approval.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up, amending Lebanon Municipal Code, Chapter 2.30, Trees and Trails Advisory Committee, tabled from last session. City Manager Nancy Brewer.
Thank you. I'm not going to go over the last staff report. Just a reminder that at the last meeting, the council tabled this issue until this meeting, with the conversation really being focused on whether members of the Parks, Trees, and Trails Committee should all be residents of Lebanon. Alternative discussion at the table was 5 members residents of Lebanon and up to 1 can live within the urban growth boundary or own property in Lebanon. Another alternative was 5 members residents. 1 member may live within the UGB, own property in Lebanon, or work in Lebanon. Since we were missing some counselors, it was tabled until everyone could be here. I will note that the ordinance language that is included does state that the Lebanon Parks, Trees, and Trails Advisory Committee shall consist of 7 members who are residents of Lebanon. And so if the council wants to make that membership different, they would need to amend that ordinance language that is in the packet and on the table in front of you. I also will note, as was discussed earlier, one of the current members of Trees and Trails lives outside the UGB, works in Lebanon. You certainly, as the council, can grandfather a member through the end of their current term, even if you change the definition of the term. And so you could go with language that everyone has to be a resident, but then grandfather one individual until, and I don't remember when her term ends right now, but we can get that for you. So those are your alternatives for your discussion.
Okay, I'll open it up for discussion.
I am in agreement regarding the resident. However, if that an option to grandfather her in until her term, if she wants to stay, that's fine with me. Just to clarify, the only reason it was brought up was she brought it up because she used to live here and has been a valuable member of the committee for some time, a grant writer and so forth and so on, and helped raise money for the committee. So I just thought it was a good idea that if she wanted to stay, that we could figure out how for her to stay. However, most of the folks on the committee, as well as this council, seem that agreed should be resident, including myself. I'm okay if the council's all right with just grandfathering her in. If she wants to stay, that's fine.
Was part of the language you mentioned was just resident, but earlier had been mentioned about someone who owns a business in Lebanon also being eligible. Were you able to discuss that?
So this came from the current membership of the Trees and Trails Committee, and there was not a unanimous opinion. There was not a vote to forward. The 2 staff members who are members of the committee abstained from voting. They're in a difficult position as making a policy recommendation when they are staff members in that way. So we did not have a majority vote for any specific language. And so in putting it in the staff report, I left the language I had proposed to Trees and Trails, which was a resident of Lebanon, and then spelled out, this was the discussion that the committee had. Again, not in consensus. There was discussion at the last meeting, no consensus among the counselors. With a full council tonight, I think a hope that there would be a majority vote for one language or another.
Briefly, can we verify when this position term ends for this person?
Yes, this person was appointed in July of 2019. And their term, they just re-upped. So their term now expires June 30th of 2025.
Oh, that's a long time.
Further discussion?
Just to, also to clarify, is there are, and part of this discussion was because we have different language on different committees. I believe that you should be a resident of Lebanon if you're going to participate in how money is spent and in those decisions. But the conversation, which I also thought we needed to consider, was if you have a business here and you pay taxes here, that depending on the committee, if that there's a possibility you could participate on a committee if you have a business and pay taxes here as well, not necessarily just a resident. But I'm okay with, I'm trying to say the right thing. I believe that you should be a resident, right? And the only reason I brought that up was because she had participated and was a valuable member of that committee. So moving forward, as we look at that language on any committee, we should probably take that into consideration on whether it's only residents and or have some other vested interest in the community and pay taxes here.
Nancy, I have a question. In that we're expanding this committee to now include parks, and we have received $2.6 million from the state for the Cheetah Lake project. What would this committee have a role in forming what that 2.6 million kind of the plan and it gets spent on for Cheetah Lake?
So we would expect this committee to review, we have design underway with a contractor, survey work is underway. And we would expect to be able to take some design work to this committee and talk with them about, are these the, I guess, the amenities we want in the park? Do we agree on their location? Do we agree on how they're kind of being portrayed? There clearly will be landscaping, where do you plant trees? Where are people going to walk? Because the primary focus of the design is on making the park accessible for Strawberry Festival. I mean, that's really the purpose of the park. And the grant is titled Cheetah Lake Accessibility. So we recognize that there is a significant amount of the work in terms of putting in paved paths. If we have enough resources, we would try to pave more of the parking lot, particularly where the fair area goes, so that that's accessible, whether you're walker, cane, wheelchair, stroller, any of those kinds of mobility challenges people may have where they say, I just don't want to walk out in the grass. I can't wheel my walker out through the gravel, so I won't go watch my grandkid play on the merry-go-round or something. And so we would expect that group to help have that discussion. This action does take the 2 staff members off of the committee and replace them with 2 parks enthusiasts. What we've had are trails enthusiasts and trees enthusiasts. This would add 2 parks enthusiasts to kind of balance out who is on the committee. And if whatever you adopt tonight then becomes work for Kim tomorrow to post up that we've got committee vacancies for interested parties. I suspect there are half a dozen people already lined up who have an interest in parks, who would throw their hat in the ring. And so that is part of it. And I would say beyond that then, as this committee looks at things like trail linkages that would go park to park or through a park, looking at, seeking grant applications, for example, for playground replacement materials. A lot of times you want to have maybe even a community conversation. It gives you a body to start having some of that public input on any kind of a park-related issue. So that's where, and you'll see that in the code language that we have proposed language, including, my proposal was that maintenance of existing infrastructure is kind of priority for dollars. You can keep throwing money out on new stuff, but when the old stuff is crumbling, what do you do with that? And so we do need to make sure that part of what happens every year in planning for the budget for maintenance, that we are prioritizing maintaining what we currently have. And that's a priority discussion that we would have with this body in terms of what's coming in a plan for next year for park maintenance.
Well, having known this lady, I personally am in favor of grandfathering that individual for this term and then moving to everyone must be a resident of Lebanon.
I agree.
Wasn't there some conversation, as well as me being the representative on the council representative, that the counselor on that committee also cannot vote?
That's correct. It is making the counselor an ex officio member. So it's really a liaison position. And the concept behind a council liaison to an advisory board like that is you as that position, for example, during council reports, could report on, here's the status of what we're working on. We are applying for a grant. We're pursuing this park development project. We have, I don't know, Dutch elm disease hitting trees in town, and so we're going to have to take down some significant trees. Be prepared for it. We're not going there. We hate Dutch elm. So, but that's that council liaison role, is to come back and share with the council things that are happening in the community, that are happening, with that advisory body, and making sure that the council stays in that loop.
Thank you for clarifying that to those that are listening.
Sure.
Well,
So,
I
so
don't-
I
I don't-
would,
oh, go ahead.
I'm just going to add, if where I hear you going is you would have the language of the code be that you have to be a resident, I would ask if you then adopt the code as written, that there be a follow-on motion to grandfather Jennifer Puccio as a member through the end of her term. She is the person that is, that lives outside of Lebanon.
I have drafted a motion to that effect if.
Oh,
anyone's
you're good. Thank you.
interested. Yes.
Finally.
Well, I was going to say, I don't know the individual, but I'm in favor of that. It sounds like she's done quite a bit of work already on the committee, and she's already started a term. So just because we keep their language doesn't mean we need to let her finish her term out, I think.
I don't have a vote in this, but I also tend to agree, having a legacy, member of the committee to finish out her term, sounds fine to me. I also had a concern, though, of it being Lebanon residents moving forward. So it sounds like this motion, when it is on the table, will hit that mark. So.
Well, one thing I would note is that there's also distinctions between city of Lebanon and then also within the urban growth boundary, because sometimes those distinctions can make a difference as well. I'm not recommending we change anything. I'm just saying those are the three levels: outside the city completely, within the urban growth boundary, but not in the city, and inside the city.
And to clarify, the draft language here is for within the city limits.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah, we had talked
Great.
about that last time, about including in the urban growth boundary as well. And no one threw rocks at me.
I wasn't opening up another can of worms, but it is something that is considered when you're talking about these kind of committees.
I'm going to go back to that 2.6 million, and I'm sure that we are going to have staff time that's going to be put into it, especially for public works. And that staff time is not funded by fees, really. It is funded by Lebanon taxpayers. So it's just something to consider when we talk about urban growth boundary versus City of Lebanon taxpayers and residents. But again, I will leave that for council to decide. I really like my chair over there, by the way.
It is nice, isn't
Yeah.
it? As long as you don't cross that line.
So can that be challenged at any time? If someone wants to be on a committee, can they come to
I'm gonna
request?
I'm gonna look to Trey, but here's the thing, the council has an advisory board to advise the council, and I believe the council can choose
Anytime.
the advisory board they want, the makeup, the number of members in or out of the city limits. That is council's purview. There is no requirement to have this body. There's no requirement from state law for membership in or out or anything else. So in this case, frankly, the council could say, we don't want any advice from any of you and get rid of all of them, right? I don't recommend that course of action, but it's the body that you're appointing to advise you. What is it that you want?
Right.
That's really what it comes down to, is what do the five of you voting on this want?
I would move that we go with the language that you must be a resident of the city of Lebanon. And then we follow it on with an amendment to allow this individual to serve out the rest of their term.
I don't think it needs to be an amendment. I think you can
Okay.
just make a motion that,
An additional motion then?
no reason to
Well,
codify it.
I move that we approve the language that says you have to be a Lebanon resident.
So just to clarify, we can go ahead and read the ordinance and the title, because I was assuming you want to pass the entire ordinance
Yes.
amendment. So ordinance bill number 2022-15, ordinance number 2991, a bill for an ordinance amending chapter 2.30 of the Lebanon Municipal Code titled Lebanon Trees and Trails Advisory Committee.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great.
And now if anybody would be so inclined, I drafted what I believe would be accurate reflection of the discussion. Anybody could move that any current member of the Lebanon Trees and Trails Advisory Committee who otherwise doesn't qualify with the membership requirements of 2.30.020 may serve the remainder of their term, but shall not be eligible for reappointment.
Thank
Second.
you. Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No, we
Motion
spent a
also
lot of time-
passes.
we
Thank
spent
you.
Enough time on that one.
We have a request for a 5-minute break. Let's go ahead and take that. We'll adjourn until 7:43.
I'm already sending it to you.
5 minutes.
Okay, I'm not going to compliment you because you've received way too many.
Well,
I was going to try to save you a walk over here.
I'll hit him later, so don't worry about it.
Where'd it go?
Way too much time on that.
Keep platforming your election campaign.
Thank you.
All right.
Yes. Meet everyone in calisthenics. Let's all do yoga.
Take it off?
Yeah, I'm hungry.
Why'd you come? You want to see?
Just wanted to see. When I read the Alvin Democrat, where I go immediately, I go to the comment section, the letters that I always read those. I read those exclusively, and then I get to the other articles that are interesting. Right?
See the article in there today?
It's like your face.
Yeah, that article.
Yeah.
Which is good.
That's good. Are you talking about the Lebanon Express, or are you talking about?
No, we're going to get here.
What?
Did you read that?
I might have not.
Okay, no worries.
I'll go back to it.
Look at
This
it.
is my
Let me see
recycled
what
bin.
you think. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever the most recent.
What I need to improve on.
I think
Cold enough in here to hang locker beef.
I just noticed that it's cold over here. It's warm over there, but I think that's all the body.
Man, I had a coat and I thought, no, I'm gonna need a coat.
But yeah, I'm gonna take off. I'll come and talk to you tomorrow.
What are you gonna do? Hang locker beef in here, Kim?
Yes, it is.
You gonna hang locker beef in here?
I'm not here to complain. I still think it's.
Oh, it's good. Yeah. A little ambush.
Jeez.
It is cold. He's talking about
Freezing on this side.
he's talking about important things, and then he goes and packs
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
It's like,
well,
what?
well, he's.
I mean, if you,
All right.
not clustered houses, but the almost zero lot line houses. If you go up to the Walmart in Albany, and just keep going past it, they've got a whole development back there. It's been there about 10 years. And I don't know how.
Executive session go yet.
I mean, they're so narrow, and you go into the house from the front, and the garage is in the back. The streets, it's more affordable housing. Yeah, they're talking about capital. So, three's my favorite.
Had pretty good attendance here lately.
Controversy.
This year, really.
Controversy. Controversy. You're still talking about it.
Always brings them out.
Always brings them out. Don't know why, but whatever.
He's on the planning commission.
Yeah, I know why too.
Yeah, because some of those folks, hey, gee, tell your girl to slow down a little bit when she talks. It was like a machine
Got a
gun.
lot to say in that 5 minutes, man. She
I
got a
know,
lot
I
to
couldn't
say.
understand 90% of it. She was going like a machine gun.
She is.
I mean, I got the gist of it, but it's like, damn. I had to tell Cassie the same thing, slow down and get closer. Because trying to hear her.
I guess for me, I understand her.
Well, you've
Because
lived with
I've
it,
lived
so,
with
you know.
It's only been 30 years.
You're running late there, lady.
Hey.
Okay, we'll call the meeting back to order at 7:43 PM and move right into the city manager's report.
Thank you. I have several things to report on this evening. As I noted in the written report, we had an error in utility billing in September. I'm sorry, our billings for October. We missed getting a date entered correctly. And so a lot of people got a bill that said they didn't have a bill in September and they didn't have a payment in September, though they did. We found that error and got it corrected, but I need to let you know we found another error this week. When storm drain rates were set in July, we put the wrong number in the system. So for the last 4 months, we have sent bills for single-family residential properties. This affects everybody, but the rate for most payers has been 52 cents a month higher than it should have been. So we will be correcting this. We will be giving credits to all customers for their appropriate proportion that they have overpaid and correct this on the November bills. We will have a notice to post on Facebook as soon as I send it to Kim and Donna, and they can get it posted up, letting the community know this, and we will put a note on the utility bill explaining why you might have a credit that you don't normally have and see that rate a little bit lower. And I do apologize for the error, and we are working hard to kind of go back to square one on how the utility billing system works. We've had a lot of turnover and trying to make sure that we understand fully what we're doing and we get it right. So just wanted to let you all know. I'd answer any questions you have on that. We have had a community member ask for us to look at traffic on South Main down around Vaughan. There's a Kidco Head Start there. There's a bus stop there, people speeding through that. That is when we have to work with ODOT on. ODOT is backed up. It may be some time, but we are going to look at what we can do there. And then my last one, I noted that I went to the League of Oregon Cities Conference last week. They did a presentation with CIS did on cybersecurity, and this kind of goes to insurance discussion earlier. They have put in a a three-step insurance coverage, and you really have to step up your cybersecurity in order to get that $1 million of insurance. Our IT shop took that step, and they worked really hard the first half of this year to make sure that we could have adequate cybersecurity insurance coverage. So we have 1 million reports of communities that have been hit with ransomware. The costs are north of $50 million by the time you get several years down the path in terms of trying to get your data back. So it's beneficial to us to have that insurance. But I also commented to the people at CIS who wondered why so many governments didn't do anything, that it is expensive, it is time consuming, and it requires extraordinary professional training on the part of IT staff to be able to implement that. And a lot of small communities cannot invest in that level of knowledge, and they need to be helping communities invest in that level of knowledge. So just, we're just beating that everywhere we can, because I think last week we were hit 3 times by phishing or ransomware attacks. I love getting an email from Paul saying he needs something right away, and he's in a meeting, and so just dealing email, nothing else. And then, a signature that's like, oh, so not how Paul would sign an email.
Under who it's from, and that wasn't Paul's name.
It's not Paul's name. So, but you do have to get pretty darn skeptical about the emails that you get. So,
Can I
anyway.
point something out? And this is just something that I've actually been litigating a case for the last 3 years. And it was a matter of what's called the business email compromise scam. And what they actually do is they can, they figure out a way to get the email address of one business that's contracting with another business, and then they spoof both their emails. And what that means is they've got an email that is very, very similar, but has like one letter different, or it has an S on the end of a word, something like that that's very not recognizable. And they start sending emails to these businesses like they're the business they're contracting with. So like the scammer is emailing both parties and setting them in the direction that they want them to go. And in this case, it ended up with changing it up and wiring $20,000 to a bank in North Carolina. The litigation is who's at fault, but who's really at fault walked away with the $20,000. So be very, very careful. So anyways, I just want to throw that out there.
That is why everybody who's on the city's email system, including all of you, get from time to time cybersecurity training, is just that reminder to be very skeptical. And then Frank
Now,
has
houses, I hear.
a wee bit of good news. And I'm
they're
going
gonna
to
talk
let
about
him
me getting
share
scammed.
good news for once.
Yeah, so let's see, I'm 1 a week hiring right now. So I've hired 3. I have 1 starting next week and then 1 starting on the 31st, excuse me. So all positive stuff, very positive, very happy. They're all very new, but that's okay. We'll train them and get them going about a year from now. So, but they're coming to us very enthusiastic, educated, and willing to want to put forth the effort it takes to make this community safe. So very happy to hear that.
So they'll be heading to
If I can, I want to piggyback that. I went on a ride along about 2 weeks ago on a Friday night. If you haven't done it, I suggest you do it. It's a hoot. The morale this time around compared to the last time I did it is so much better. People are, ask Josh about the old bull and the young bull. I'll let him explain that to you.
I'm aware of that story.
Yeah, we had that discussion, but we got to take 14 grams of meth off the street, some fentanyl out of the Safeway parking lot. I've gone shopping there a lot, but I've never gotten that kind of pharmacy. But there was a lot, and it was a known person that had hit Clint Sheets once over in front of my house, over at Crew's place. Yeah, so the idea of what they're doing, the excitement is so much more than it used to be. It really looks good. I was impressed.
Thank you.
My reference to the houses was there was a scam where people were getting phone calls from someone identifying themselves as Chief Stevenson, and apparently he was giving away houses or something.
Yeah.
I saw it was shared on Facebook on LPD, so
there
that was
was-
just in case anyone missed that reference. He's really not giving out houses.
Really not.
Please do not call him about that.
Nor will I come arrest you if you don't give me money. That was another
Sure.
one.
Oh yeah, that was the other piece.
Well, maybe it was that Frank has free housing available. You know, there is
Put that
that.
in the strategy. Okay. Are there any questions for the city manager's report?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
The illegal camping ad hoc committee, that's the one that you mentioned is meeting soon,
Tomorrow. That's tomorrow morning
Tomorrow?
at 10 o'clock?
and that's open to the public?
I believe so.
You're here?
It's here in this room.
Okay.
Oh, it's in the Justice Center? Okay. It's in the Justice Center.
Okay.
That tells you I have not looked at a location on my agenda yet, but that's tomorrow, not today, so.
Hold on, let me just verify.
And
that.
everybody, is there a substitute for the mayor?
Not for me, so I can't be here tomorrow.
It's at the travel station tomorrow at 10.
Yeah.
According to
Okay.
my,
It's here. It's here,
It's here,
not at the Justice Center.
right here.
I think with that ad hoc committee on camping, illegal camping or whatever it's called, we are having a work session about that at, when is it? October 26th.
Yeah.
Am I correct on this? Yeah, noon, October 26th. So while maybe we are not at the meeting or a representative from council might not be at the meeting unless Councilor Dykstra will be, we'll also have a follow-up on it a couple weeks after, so.
You won't be there.
Okay, any items from council? Seeing none. Opportunity for public and press comments, second opportunity? Would anyone else? Nope, I'm getting a no from Sarah. Okay. Next scheduled council meeting, again, October 26th at noon. That's that work session I was talking about. And then it says that on November 9th, the day after the election, please vote, that at 5 o'clock, there is a work session as well before our 6 o'clock regular session. So make sure you, oh, okay. Good, because I didn't know what that was about on here. I just saw that it was there. So regular session, 6 o'clock, November 9th, no work session. And with that, we will go ahead and adjourn, and we will be moving into executive session again after a 5-minute break. So adjourned at 7:53. Thank you. Recess.